Tonight we're going to talk about, overcoming worldliness in the broad sense, but a bad reputation. It says bad reputation. Really, you could just say about reputation in general, because it can be good or it can be bad, and we'll talk more about what that means. As has become my custom, the last maybe 2 or 3 lessons, I kind of like to do a quick preview of what we're going to go through, just so you have a kind of maybe a mental picture of the broad aspects we'll be looking at before we get into the more nitty-gritty stuff. The overall issue is reputation. We're going to look at what is our reputation. What is, one's reputation? I mean, I think most of us understand what reputation means, generally speaking. But we'll look at more what is that, what is its impact, and all the rest. And then we're going to look at, as this series of lessons typically does, of course, is they don't just look at what the issue is, but how can you do something to, be positive and proactive to keep from fouling up, right? And so we'll be looking at protecting our reputation, hopefully our good reputation. We'll look at our actions, we'll look at our words, and we'll look at our companions. And then lastly, we'll look at involvement in social media. Nowadays, social media has its own little, category in most areas now. So we'll look at all of those aspects and see how it fits together for looking at our reputation. Any questions, comments before we get started here in earnest? All right, let me go ahead and get us onto the next slide here. Our reputation. There's some different verses we can look at. One, if you want to follow along in your Bible, that's of course encouraged. We'll look at real quickly here Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1. This is a familiar verse for many of us, but I'll give you a second to turn to it if you wish. Proverbs 22, verse 1. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold. That's pretty powerful. That's pretty motivating, it sounds like to me there. We have another verse we can look at here. Okay, that wasn't, okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second to check. I'm very curious to look, because I've got a little outline of the slides. Yeah, that's right. It is right. Okay. I was saying, I got it mixed up. There's some slides later that all they have is Bible verses quoted, and then others have little statements like this here. Let's talk about what is our reputation then. And there's a basic definition of it. People's judgments of our overall qualities. Are you held in esteem or are you not? One thing I was going to ask here, and you don't have to raise your hand and answer this, but to be curious. I don't think reputation is discussed quite as much as it used to be by your family members that were older, especially maybe your grandfather or your father, somebody, an authority figure like that, someone, to give guidance. I think in the olden days, especially in a town like Butler, but even bigger towns, but especially a place like this, I think probably a lot of fathers talk to maybe mainly their sons back in the old days, but I think it's good to talk to both genders, right? About the family reputation, right? I mean, family reputation means something to most people. When it doesn't mean anything, and again, I don't want to say this in the sense of like, oh, we have us to uphold our reputation as being elites. No, I don't mean that. I mean just basic decency, right, and being good people. I think that used to be more emphasized. And I think you can definitely say that society's ills here in the United States, perhaps around the world, a lot of these ills have stemmed from not having somebody there to encourage, hey, you have a proud family history here, a tradition of people loving each other, being good people, behaving right, and all this stuff. You have something to live up to. I think a lot of kids nowadays, they don't hear that. They don't have even an example to live that way. And so therefore we have the mayhem that we have, right? The crime, the things that go on. And a lot of that is because nobody's worried about upholding what they used to call the family honor, right? And that's a problem. But it's a problem for a Christian especially. We'll look at this a little bit more here as we go along here. It's one of those things, a reputation, You can't buy it, right? You've got to earn it. What was that old Smith Barney commercial back in the 70s, early 80s? We make money the old-fashioned way. We earn it, right? You have to earn it, a good reputation. Now, you may be fortunate enough to be born into a family that has a good reputation, and then all you have to do is, well, I say all you have to do, but you uphold the reputation. Sometimes you got to make a good reputation when your family's had a terrible reputation, right? But hey, we all have our chance to do that. But as Christians, and we'll look at this more closely here shortly, we have to be concerned about our reputation, because you're talking about a family of honor, right? I mean, the Lord Jesus Christ, the body of Christ itself, is who we're representing. We'll talk more about that as we go along. Let's move forward here on the screen. Jesus in Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16, likened his disciples to salt and light. We need to be salt and light in the world. It's difficult to do that, or if not impossible, when you don't have a decent reputation. I'm not going to read the whole passage here, but one verse that actually was emphasized in the outline, but it's one that I've always liked, the imagery that this gives to me. Maybe it's a good imagery for you as well. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden, right? A lot of times America has been considered a shining city on a hill of freedom to the world, right? With maybe Statue of Liberty literally holding up, a light there to the world, for people to come. I don't know if we have that imagery so well in the state of Florida. We're pretty low level as far as, elevation, although there are a couple places. Who can think of a city? I know over there, Brother Dick's there. He knows a lot about Florida history and geography. He may know better than anybody here. What's a city in Florida that's set up on a hill? Can anyone think of a city in Florida that might be set up on a hill? At least relatively speaking. I'm not talking about a 1,000-foot mountain. Tallahassee, especially have you ever driven in, especially not on the interstate, but is it 27 that comes right up? You look like you're going right to the Capitol building. And that's now a very tall, modern building. But it looks, and I guess it is, you are going up a hill as you go toward that. Another one, if we're going to stick to the Panhandle, I don't know, is Tallahassee Panhandle, or is that right on the edge? I consider Panhandle anything below out the state of Alabama, right? That's for sure Panhandle. Tallahassee's certainly North Florida. But there's another city up there. In fact, I drove through it about 2 weeks ago. Drove through it and came back through it. Can anybody think of a city that might be sitting up kind of it's not a huge city, but it's a city sitting up on a hill in the Panhandle, right there on I-10. Anybody can think of it? Okay, I heard Monticello, but that's not the one I'm thinking about. It's probably true. No, Crestview. Yeah, Crestview is actually, you can see as you get close to it, it starts to rise again, especially in this low general speaking area. But that's something that we want to remember, that we need to be a light like a city on a hill. We need to be salt and light and a city on the hill, and we have to do this by fostering a good reputation. This is, I thought was an interesting. This is not literally taking word for word from the Bible, obviously, but it was something that Brother Rogers put together in his outline here. He said, every Christian is a walking, talking, 24-hour advertisement for the Lord, the gospel, and the local church. And then he asked the question, what kind of messages are we sending to the world, right? That's a tall order, right? You're on display pretty much all the time, As I confessed a couple weeks ago when we were talking about bad language, and sometimes I maybe say things I shouldn't say out at my house in the woods, and I yell at maybe the dogs can hear it or something, but hopefully not people, right? But hey, God's always watching, right, and listening. But also your reputation, how are people perceiving you? This is something that is of great concern here. Let's go, by the way, let's go to an Old Testament passage here. I'm going to ask for a volunteer to read for this. Let me have someone read Nehemiah. We don't read that a whole lot. Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 13. Give us all a chance to get to it. Yeah, Nehemiah chapter 6 and verses 10 through 13. If somebody let me know you got it, and I'll let you read it for us. Yes, sir. Our visitor, soon to be returnee, coming back. All right, appreciate it.
provided that I can read it without my glasses. Afterward I came to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of Metahabel, and who was a secret informer. And he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Indeed, at night they will come to kill you. And I said, should such a man as I flee? And who is there such as I who would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. Then I perceived that God had not sent him at all, but that he had pronounced this prophecy against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. For this reason he was hired, that I should be afraid and act that way in sin, so that they might have cause for an evil report, and that they might reproach me.
Yeah. So here you have, this is something we see throughout the Bible, right? You see it here. You see it with the disciples and Jesus, where there were evil people around that were trying to ruin their reputation, and just, put a black mark, so to speak, on what they were doing. In this case, what was Nehemiah trying to do that they were trying to discourage him from doing? One of you more expert Bible historians.
Finish the wall.
Right. And so they were trying to get him scared and act like, lose his leadership in a lot of respects, right? We've seen that lately where there's been accusations, this is not a fit leader because they didn't do this or didn't do that, right? It matters when you're a leader, but it matters when you're just a plain old Christian as well, right? It matters. But we have to be worried. He was smart enough to realize that this was going to damage what he was trying to do. And we need to think like that. We need to be understand, again, not for the purpose of our own self-esteem and pumping ourselves up. If you're worried about your reputation just so you can get glory from it, then you've got the wrong motivation, no doubt about it. But if you're doing it, kind of protecting the family name, in this case, the family of Jesus Christ, of God, then that's a whole different ball game here. Also, and we didn't read it verbatim here, but if you look at, I'll go ahead and let's look at Luke. Go to Luke if you would, Luke 14. We'll go ahead and read chapter 14, verses 34 and 35. We'll go ahead and read that now. I'll go ahead and just read it when I'll give you a chance to get there. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is neither fit for the land nor the dunghill, but men throw it out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. When you think about salt's an interesting thing, right? If it loses its flavor, which is its positive aspect, right? And we're supposed to season those around us with Christ, the love of Christ, His Word, etc. We're supposed to be that salt and light. In this case, we're talking about salt. But if we lose that flavor, there's still the possibility of negative consequences of the salt, right? And I've never really thought of it this way so much, I guess because I've never been in the practice of taking salt and literally throwing it on the ground, right? Or, trying to kill something with salt. But even salt that goes bad, right? If you throw it on grass, it can kill the grass. And even on a dunghill, if you throw it on that, it can kill vegetation that may be growing from that. And so, in the same sense, our reputation, we want the good reputation. But unfortunately, when you lose your good reputation, basically the salt and the ability to season those around us, what you're left with is still the negative aspects, like old salt, in that you then besmirch the gospel and you bring bad reputation to followers of Christ, So it's a loaded thing. It's not just a simply, I've got to uphold a good reputation. You need to be concerned about if you lose your good reputation, what are you left with? A bad reputation, right? And so that's something we'll look at more as we go along here. Let's look at, and maybe I haven't been doing this quite as well as I should, but let's go on to the next, what I would call subtopic, and it's the biggest, area of this lesson, is protecting our reputation. And we can do that by, first of all, our actions. We've got to look at our actions here as we look at protecting this. And I'm going to just name a couple of things here, some verses. I'm not going to quote directly from all of them, but just basically a principle that's found in that verse. If you wish to go back later and look at it more carefully, that's up to you. We don't have time to read all of them. But in the outline, it talks about here, we must depart from iniquity. And that's verse, I should say, 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 19. Abstain from every form of evil. You see that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 21 through 22. We're not allowed to indulge in the sinful pleasures of this world. Look in 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. And he goes on in his outline, Brother Rogers here, he mentions things that we cannot do. And I'm just going to go ahead and mention some of these. He mentioned, and then I just want to add a little caveat to that before we move past it. He says, we cannot be involved in such things as fornication, dancing. We dealt with dancing. This is one I had not remembered seeing, but I can see where it came from as far as maybe being moderately attired and stuff. Mixed swimming, he called it. I haven't heard that term in a while. Mixed swimming. That sounds like a 1950s term, right? Yeah. We cannot drink alcohol or use drugs and tobacco. And what I would say about that, I don't want to like dwell on these matters, but I would say, as we've gone through this outline, no doubt about it, Brother Rogers, and I guess if you're going to be concerned about sin, it's better to be, I don't want to use the term overly concerned about it, but draw a line that goes way out there, right? I'm saying, certainly with fornication, there's just no person who truly is seeking God would say, oh, it's fine, there's no problem with fornication. Illegal drugs, who could justify that? When you say and again, he may be doing this for the sake of, being quick about it so we don't dwell on it. We've already had a lesson on dancing. Obviously we are talking about not all dancing is sinful necessarily, right? Same thing with mixed swimming, you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to, you admit, you're not going to see me out in St. Augustine Beach next time I go to the beach out there at one of these places we stay or whatever, and tell people with a sign up, you're perishing now because you had mixed swimming. You know what I'm saying? How far do you go? I don't know. I'm just, what he said about it, and I think some people would argue about whether that's always a sin, but I understand what he's saying. Also, when it comes to alcohol, and I don't want to get, again, I could open a whole can of worms on this, but I guess the question I've often asked myself, I said, do I believe from what I know, and I am no Bible scholar, you know this, right? You know this. I'm not. So I'm not going to pretend to be. But from what I've read, the lessons I've heard, do I think Jesus Christ actually consumed any alcoholic wine in his life? Do I believe that? If someone had a gun to my head right now and said, you got to be right about this, did Jesus ever consume any alcoholic wine? What do you think? I think he did. I think he did. So for me to say that now you are definitely sinning if you had some alcoholic wine when Jesus did, that would be hard for me to justify in my mind completely. I'm not saying maybe he's correct. I'm just saying, I say this to say this. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's some nuances to this perhaps we could look at more, but we understand what we're talking about. But he also points out in this next bit of the outline, he talks about, but even if, you're not doing those things particularly, if you're there where these things are happening, especially he talked about in his outline on alcohol, about, beer drinking type parties, right, where they're beer bashes. I'll never forget one time I was sitting there, I think I told y'all here a couple weeks ago, my old high school football coach passed away, and I remember one time we were watching game film. This is back then we actually looked at real film, not video. And now you know what they're looking at, right? Digital stuff. But anyway, he an offensive lineman who I was familiar with, he went the wrong way on a play, and so the guy got through and probably sat the quarterback. And I'll never forget Coach Odom said, he was probably thinking about the beer bash after the game, you know what I'm saying? And I remember some of those parties, right? Some of you might remember some high school parties where nobody was actually legal enough to be drinking, right? But they were there, that's the things that we have to be especially careful about, this appearance of evil. Tobacco, I would just say, look, is an occasional cigar a sin? There could be arguments on both sides, you know what I'm saying? But we'll go on. I just point out that we don't need to get all wrapped up in all that. But the idea is, of course, generally speaking, sin is a problem if you're engaging it or if you're hanging out with people and tolerating it around you. It is a problem. It is definitely a problem to your reputation and to the cause of Christ here. Let's read another. For the sake of time, I'll go ahead and just read this passage. Any questions or comments or scoldings before I move on? All right, let's look at 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 through 12. Beloved, I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lust, which war against the soul, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. We've got to be concerned about how our reputation is perceived by the world, even if we don't, necessarily think that they respect us for the stands that we do take always. But we want our reputation to be good so we can have that influence. And frankly, so we're not pointed out as hypocrites, right? I mean, do you want to be a hypocrite? I have to ask myself that, regularly. Are you being a hypocrite here at times when you preach, so to speak, things, and then you don't do them? Or, are you being hypocritical? These are things we need to look at. All right, let's move on to, and I probably, I kind of just breeze through those. But our words, we'll go on to the next, what I consider a subtopic here. Our words. Speech, and we've talked about this here a lot here just in the last couple of weeks, right? How you speak. It's a big deal. It is a huge deal. Just real quick, I'm going to cite Matthew 12, verses 34 and 35, where we read about, what is the language that's coming out of your mouth? It's proceeding from what part of you? Anybody? Your heart. It's coming out of your heart, either good or evil, right? And then also we can look at other scripture that talks about a well, a well being bad water, good water, salt water, fresh. I mean, it's not supposed to be that way, right? It's not supposed to be that way. Now again, from a standard of reasonability, it would be hard to. I don't know many people like this. If you spend much time around them, sooner or later, you're probably going to hear something that is unkind. You're going to probably hear them gossip a little bit. You're probably going to hear them do things that aren't right, that should not be proceeding from their mouth, that would, generally speaking, you would think, oh, that's coming from a heart of evil or whatnot. But we all tend to fall into that, don't we? I mean, I'd like to think that most of what we say is salt and light. Most of what we say is proceeding forth from a good heart. But we would be fooling ourselves, right, if we didn't admit we do sometimes have things that come out, and if somebody heard it, they would say, that's a Christian saying that? Brother Rogers, I should say, in the outline points out, people expect a Christian to act a certain way. And they're watching them, right? If they perceive, especially if you're bold as a Christian, right? You better be careful. If you are actually up there, spouting this and that and good things that you should be saying perhaps, but you say these things and then you turn around and people catch you doing something that's not right. And especially, I would say, I think a lot of us Christians are guilty of is talking about other people when they're not around. I think that's something that is, if you can find somebody that never does that, to me, that's like a sterling person, somebody who never engages in talking about other people, no matter what. You never hear them ever do it. That is an outstanding individual, because I'm telling you, most people I know, if I look throughout my life, even the ones I thought were really great people, generally speaking, I heard them a time or two talking about people when they should not have been doing it, and I've done it myself, right? So, again, and now you got to consider, how does that affect your reputation here? Let's move on to because we when we talk about our words, our speech and stuff, we definitely have talked about that the last 2 weeks a lot. So let's move on to our companions. We haven't necessarily dealt with how you are around other people. So that's a cue, isn't it? All right. It's its own little thing here. All right, our companions. This is the balancing act, is what I would call it to some degree. What do you mean a balancing? And this is, in Brother Rogers' outline here, he says, this is an area where Christians have a real challenge. in the area of companionship or those that hang around, etc., and all that. Here's a verse here. Let's look at 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17. I'll give you a moment here to get to it. Sometimes I go through it too quickly and you don't have time to put eyes on yourself. Because this is one I think that actually, let's see what it does here. Yeah, it does this, but it doesn't have any, like little pithy statement or anything like that. All right, let's go ahead and read. I'll go ahead and read it. 2 Corinthians 6:17. Come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you. And in the outline, Brother Rogers, he says, that like Israel of old, we must remain separate from the sinful world around us. And I'll admit, when you read that verse, it sounds like an Old Testament verse, doesn't it? Where Israel was commanded not to have things to do with certain people and stuff, or peoples. And you're like, well, wait a second, we're in the New Testament age, so to speak. Now we're in a different situation. Do I have the same kind of thing? At the same time, remember this though, and we're kind of like sift through it here a little bit. At the same time as we're not to be marred by the world or corrupted by those around us that we're hanging out with, we're also supposed to reach people, right? And even Jesus, and he points out, obviously, if he didn't, obviously people would be sitting out here knowing, yeah, Jesus did this. Jesus sat with sinners, ate with sinners, right? So it is a fine line sometimes when, you need to be out among the world. We want to have, our good reputation is the key that gives us the ability to have influence, right? If you don't have a decent reputation, you're not going to have much influence with people, right? So we want to use that. But we have to, again, be salt and light, and we cannot allow them to do that. Let's look at another verse. I'm not going to quote it verbatim here. Actually, it's a passage. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 9 through 12. We're allowed to associate with worldly people. In fact, I would say perhaps God might give us a pass. You might say, if you abstain from hanging out with certain people, if you, even though you wanted to reach them, you knew that you were too weak. Maybe it's old buddies that you did drugs with, right? I can understand there's some circumstances where maybe it's too loaded, right? That maybe you could not safely go there and hang out with these people to reach them because you would be drawn back into it, especially if you have an addiction problem, right? I can see that. But generally speaking, I don't think that we should be in the habit of building up walls around us. I can't go there, I can't go there. A lot of times when we don't want to get next to a certain person or type person, it's not really so much that we feel like we're going to be drawn into it always. It's more of we're just not very comfortable with it, right? And so we need to sometimes be uncomfortable and talk to people that may come off a little bit, not what we're normally dealing with here. Something we need to look at here. But here in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11, I'll go ahead and read this. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. So that's the line where you draw, right? You're to have influence with those and be acting in such a way with it, even if they don't necessarily they aren't so hot on your ideas about religion and being a Christian and stuff. They may not necessarily generally respect that itself, but because of the reputation that you have. I have no doubt, we know this, that many a person has been won to Christ because somebody respected a Christian, a particular Christian. Later on it talks about in here where, I forget the exact language that Brother Rogers, I think he says like your unique companion circle or something. Each one of us here has certain people that we know. They could be family, they could be friends, people we work with, all these different type of people. And across, some of these are like for decades, right? But very few of us are going to have the exact same people, right? Each person here that's sitting here out here right now, you could just pick even out right now 5 or 6 people around you that you could reach a lot better than maybe Brother Brian could, or I could, or someone back in the back. So, you know what I'm saying? You have that special, unique relationship with them and a reputation with them and background with them that you are in the ideal situation, right? To try to win them for Christ, you know? And something I think that we need to look at is, are we maximizing that, right? Are we really examining that on a regular basis and looking at our life and say, okay, I've got this friend, I've got this person I see every single day. And they say something to me every single day. And I think they like me a lot because they joke with me and you know, we get along real well. I mean, how many of us are kind of sleepwalking on that, right? Where we're not really doing anything about it. We're not looking for those opportunities to use. We've got to use the currency of our reputation to influence people for Christ. And if we're not doing that, then we're halfway there, but we're not all the way there. We need to be not only developing the good reputation that we need, but then employing it, putting it to use, deploying it, you might say, is another way of putting it here. But again, we're not able to go out and walk with the sinners, right? You can't be walking in what they are doing here. Let's look at another verse that kind of reemphasizes that a little bit. Solomon warned, this is from Proverbs.
Can I stop?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Am I reading this to say that our association with people in the world, not the church, but people in the world, we would be a little more tolerant of this type behavior than we would our fellow Christians?
What I don't mean sinful activity, tolerant of the sin, but I mean more. Well, you might say this. Here's the thing: if you knew a Christian that you were with for that you knew for a long time, and they had a certain thing they were doing, and you felt like it's questionable, you may be sinning in it, you know, and you would go to them. That makes sense. If you're dealing with somebody of the world who's not yet a Christian, you know, it's almost like, and I could be saying this all wrong, I'll let other people that do better jobs of this than I do, saying that's not probably what you're going to address right away. You know what I'm saying? You got to address their status more than what they're doing, I think, most of the time. Now, again, if they're doing something horrible, they're not killing people, you know, that's something different. But I mean, you know certain people are going to have sinful habits and stuff. You don't sit there and hang out with them while they're doing it. But I don't think it's wrong for you to go and hang out in a more sanitized situation, and as long as you're not being drawn into it, and then you start doing the same thing. That's kind of the test of it. If you're being drawn and you're doing what they're doing, then you're off. If you're not, you're not. Yeah.
My metaphor is, if you visit a pig pen, you could get dirty, but when you play in that pig pen,
Right. Well, Tommy has pigs. I sometimes think he might play in the pen, but no, he doesn't. Pigs are actually pretty clean. Talk to Tommy about that. But anyway, right. I understand what you're saying. He's probably really sad now about that because he's got a lot of pigs. I've seen they're big pigs too. But in any event, right, exactly. That's what we're talking about. But I don't think you tolerate the sin.
No, but we're more tolerant and more patient. Maybe the word would be patient instead of tolerant with people who are outside the world, because we still need to be around them to try to influence them and win them.
Right.
But people in the church or in the family of God that are doing these things that get mentioned here: fornicator, covetous, idolater, railer, drunkard, extortioner. If they're doing all these things and they're in the church, well, we need not to associate with them for our own protection as well as their doing them some good to try to teach them better. Yeah. That's the way I'm reading it.
Yeah, oh yeah, and Brian, he covered, this is one that I think comes up oftentimes in that situation, is the issue of homosexuality, for example. If you had someone who was going to church here and was just living in a lifestyle of homosexuality and you just never said anything to them, well, then you're doing them a disfavor, right? But if somebody comes in here and wants to visit with us, and maybe they're homosexual, well, you certainly you welcome them to be here, and you don't treat them like they're a bad, you know what I'm saying? You want to treat them in a kind way. That's what I think, at least, you know what I'm saying? And because they're from that standpoint, until you're covered by the blood of Jesus, you're going to the same place anyway, whether you're just doing this little bad thing here or doing something really awful over there, right? And so we have to reach them with the gospel. But I would, from that standpoint, I would say you're pretty wide open, at least we ought to be, in who we will associate with for the sake of saving their souls.
We can't win the world if we don't associate.
Oh, absolutely, right. I think again, now I say certain circumstances where, because of a situation where you grew up in a town and you were a drug addict and you got out of that and you go back and it's a powerful thing. You may be in that situation, you say, I can't do it. I just don't have the strength, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to judge somebody for that, That's kind of a rare situation. Well, not totally rare, but I mean, most of us, we would do better, and I'm talking about myself most of all, to expand. Part of it is just managing your time and stuff, right? If we actually, like I remember one time when we went down into Mobile, this was years and years ago, I went with my buddy Shannon, and we were at some sort of retreat or something, and I remember this, he was like a street preacher, He came in and he was late, and he said, I don't apologize for that. He said, the lost take precedence over everything, is what he said. And you could tell this was a man that had like a passion to reach people for Christ. And he just spent all his time, almost every waking hour, it appeared to me, doing that. You know what I'm saying? Most of us, because think about it, just go to Gainesville or Lake City, get out of your car, start walking around where the people, there's a place down there, what is it, Newberry and I-75 now? I saw one day, this was probably like 3 weeks ago, I saw like 4 or 5 cop cars. I figured they were in there kind of running them out. Maybe the county commission said, we've got to do something. This place is looking like, New York City back in the 1970s, right? Looking really bad. But if you would actually get out and talk to these people and hang out with them for a while, but most of us aren't going to do that because that's way out of our comfort zone, including my own. I hand out bags of blessing, right? But you're not seeing me a whole lot hanging out and by their fire or whatever when it's going on when they do that. But I would do well. We didn't really get to social media. I will say this about social media, and this the author of the outline, Brother Rogers, he pointed out, he quoted some research they've done about how a lot of people that want to try to get jobs. Well, when they put that application in, I guess it's usually electronic nowadays, they're checking social media, right? They're checking them out. And even after you get your job to stay employed, I think they said they're still checking on like 48% of employees. They're regularly checking your Facebook and your Twitter and all these other things. And you've heard, of course, about a lot of people that have been caught saying this, that, or the other, these pictures that get posted and all that, and they end up getting fired or something, you know what I'm saying? What he pointed out was that sadly a lot of Christians, and I know this real quick before they all get in here, well, they can come in while I'm talking. One thing that I think a lot of us, especially on Facebook, I've joined Twitter, but I can't get into Twitter that much. It's too, I don't know, far-flung or something. I can't. Facebook's more my speed, I'll be honest. But on Facebook, when I have these friends and they post stuff, you want to embrace your Facebook friends, right? You want to support them and like stuff, and of course these days like is not enough. You better comment, or they're probably not going to be. They'll think, oh, you didn't even really care, But we have to be careful because a lot of times Christians are maybe liking stuff that they shouldn't be, right? They're almost endorsing what that person has posted because you're torn between wanting to show that you're still friends and you care about them, but you don't want to be endorsing something that is not in step with this, right? So that's something that he pointed out. I don't know how many of us are ruining our reputation online. I hope not too many. And I think most of us here have a good reputation, right?
You are ruining your reputation.
Right, yeah. What did I say, running it?
No, you said running, I said are ruining.
Ruining it, that's the thing. You can ruin it, but I think most of us have a good reputation that are sitting here right now. I'm guessing, I don't know everybody's reputation, but I think most of us do. Some of us have a better reputation than we deserve, right? Some of us have a better reputation than we deserve. That's something else we have to be worried about. So anyway, I think that's a good way to wrap it up here. I appreciate the opportunity to teach the last half of the quarter, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens for the spring quarter, which will be beginning next Wednesday. So, thanks again.
Good class. Good class.
I didn't get to those slides.
That's all right, we did it.
What's up, Cadence? Still 214? All right, 214, if you don't have it marked already. 214, trust and obey. Trust and obey. If you haven't, you will be, Tyler will be sharing to your Facebook the initial VBS promotions. VBS is scheduled June 4th through 7th, so we want to start promoting now. We're like 3 months ahead of everybody else starting, so promote early, promote often. Make sure you share it and allow Tyler to be able to share that to your pages.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When's our web page gonna be up and running for everybody to? Is that a good question or a dumb question? Huh?
The basic functional web page is up now.
Okay,
The finishing touches on it will be probably about another 2 or 3 weeks.
okay, but everyone needs to know that's coming.
Yes. And, and as we get closer, when the rest of it's built in, we'll talk about it more then, but, do you remember April 2nd, out at Midway Church, Sunday evening, old time singing and ice cream fellowship. And then, March 26th, the last Sunday of the month of March, we'll have kickball and cookout on Sunday evening that will lead into a youth-led service that Sunday night. So last Sunday of the month, we're going to be utilizing, and that'll be going towards the direction of the youth-led service. So I want to encourage you to mark your calendars for that. If you didn't grab a February Bible reading list, that's okay. The March list is back there. If you grabbed the February list, just turn it over. The March is on the other side. So, if you hadn't started yet, there are some scripture reading lists in the back. So, what else do we have that we need to be mindful of? Prayer requests or anything else? Yes.
I would like to pray for my aunt in Cuba. She's not doing very good at all, so the good Lord, if it's time to take it, just not to let it suffer.
All right. For our latest Tia in Cuba.
Shad.
Who?
Leon Shad.
Leon Shad?
He's in the VA
Okay.
and in bad shape.
Okay. Leon Shad in the VA. All right.
Denise Crawford.
Continue to keep Denise Crawford in prayer and the Crawford family. Also keep the family of Sue Lawler in prayer. What else do we have that need to be mindful of?
Continue to pray for Catherine and her child.
Yeah. For Catherine, obviously next week when she comes back, that everything is safe and all that. About the only way you can travel further is from San Diego to fly up to Maine versus from here to where she is. So, it's crisscrossed. So,
So it's a movie flight?
pretty close. Pretty close. The short leg is from here to Dallas. That's the short leg. So, all right. Anything else that we've got? Okay.
watching and listening and studying different things on change. And, you know, as the interest rates continue to come back up, and as the prognosticators continue to say that, you know, this recession will be at least what it was in 2008 or whatever, a lot of people have this mindset of draw back, try and preserve, keep hold of what you have, and just try and come through this one intact. You know, that protection mentality. And all the stuff I read, all the stuff I watch, says, you know, if you try and hold on to what you had yesterday, you're going to come to a place where you got nothing in the future. You can't try and reach the people you already have. You got to try and reach the people that you ain't reached. And I thought, yeah, that's valid. But then I was reading a journal, Joint Defense Force Quarterly. He said, yeah, I got on their subscription list and I read it. And it was interesting because it was about insurgent militia groups in Somalia over the last 20 years. And what struck me about this article, the same things that destroy militaries and militias are the same things that destroy churches. When a militia tries to fight a big army by the rules of a big army, the militia loses every time. You know what that tells me, brothers and sisters? Don't ever set the agenda of the Lord's church by what everybody else is doing in the religious world. We don't play the same game by the same rules. Then, what happens is, once they get some successes, and they get the budget, and they get the manpower, and they get some weapons, most of the militias forget what got them there, and they start trying to play game by the established military. Because what got them success, they forgot what got them success, and so they try and hold by now changing the way they play the game. And all the militias that did that lost back out. And the one militia that didn't, they never quit using insurgent tactics. When they had the manpower, the resources, and the money, they equipped everyone else to succeed the way they'd been succeeding the whole time. And they pushed all of the others out, and they pushed an entire army from another country out of their country. Now you say, Brian, you're always talking about warfare stuff. Yes. Yes. Because probably the four most common motifs in Scripture are what? Warfare, architecture, agriculture, and family. Those are your four most common models. And warfare is the most common from front to back. As you and I go back out into this week, I want to challenge you. Think about how you've been approaching people in your life with the gospel, that they've been resisting you. If you hit it with more of the same, you know what you're going to get? More of the same back. You've been fighting a fight with someone in your life, and you're not even fighting it with them. It's a spiritual fight. It's the good fight of faith. Change your tactic. Change your tactic. If you aren't winning, look at what you're doing and change your tactic. But always remember this. You will never, ever win at any game, any combat of any form, if you fight it by the rules of the one that you're fighting against. You cannot win it. You never will. Why? Because when you have the ability to make the rules, you know how you make the rules?
In your favor.
So it's always to your advantage. This is why you and I, if you haven't done it, what are we now, 40 some odd days out on our taxes? They wrote the rules. So you have to give them your paperwork. You say, no, you're not going to win that fight. Okay? But think about it. Who have you been trying to talk to with the gospel that every angle you come at them, that you've been coming for the last 10 years? Change what you do. Change what you do. But I throw this one to you. If you haven't started for them with at least 10 days in prayer, back off and go at it in prayer first. And then go again. If you're here tonight and you've never obeyed the gospel of Jesus Christ, and Jesus is a perfect point of what I'm talking about. You've been fighting the devil and you've been losing. Every time you and I fight the devil in the power of our own flesh, we're always going to lose. The victory comes when we let Jesus fight the battle for us, through us, on his terms. Because who would have thunk, and that is proper Cambridge English, I do believe, past tense of thinked, right? Who would have thunk that if you falsely accused a guy, held illegal trials, beat him till he couldn't hardly stand up, till he was dehydrated, had blood loss, low blood sugar, hung him on a tree, mocked him and everything else, that him dying would be the way that he would overcome, defeat, and outmaneuver the greatest enemy of mankind? You see, when Friday closed and his body went into that tomb, it looked like the devil had won. But all the devil had done was sown the seed of his own destruction. Because on the third day, an unstoppable power came, because Jesus didn't fight the devil's fight the way the devil fights. He fought him and he outmaneuvered him by the word of God and the power of God.